It was a typical day in Los Angeles. The sun was shining brightly through the wide glass windows of the motorcycle dealership. The buzz of idle chatter mixed with the soft hum of the air conditioning. It wasn't a day that seemed different from any other. And yet, in the midst of all the ordinary happenings, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Keanu Reeves, a man whose name carried a quiet kind of fame, walked into the dealership. His presence wasn't immediately noticed. To most, he was just another person walking through the door. He wasn't wearing the flashy clothes of a celebrity. Instead, he dressed simply, like he always did: jeans, a plain shirt, and a worn-out jacket that had clearly seen better days. He moved through the aisles with the same kind of ease he had when riding one of his many motorcycles, which was often a topic of conversation in the motorcycle world. Keanu wasn't just some Hollywood actor. He was a genuine motorcycle enthusiast. He had always been drawn to the freedom and simplicity of bikes, the way they allowed him to escape the hustle of the world and find solace in the open road. It was a passion he kept relatively private, only sharing it with those who truly understood. On this particular day, though, Keanu wasn't there for a casual visit. He had heard about a new motorcycle model, a bike he had been curious about for some time. He'd heard the reviews, and his curiosity had finally led him to the dealership. He wasn't there to make a scene or to be recognized. He simply wanted to check out the bike, ask a few questions, and maybe, if he liked it, take it for a ride. As he wandered through the showroom, he couldn't help but appreciate the sleek designs of the motorcycles on display. The polished chrome, the leather seats, the powerful engines. Each bike seemed like a piece of art in its own right. It was clear that the dealership was proud of its selection, and Keanu respected that. He knew what it took to build something like that, the craftsmanship and dedication behind each machine. He was drawn to a particular model. It was a sleek, modern motorcycle with a design that looked both classic and futuristic at the same time. He stood there for a moment, admiring the craftsmanship, feeling the familiar itch for the open road. He reached out to touch the handlebars, running his fingers along the cold steel. At that moment, a young employee approached. He had been busy with other customers, but he noticed Keanu standing by the bike. He didn't immediately recognize the man, but he figured he must be someone interested in making a purchase. He walked up to Keanu with a half-smile, ready to offer assistance. "Can I help you?" the employee asked, his voice polite but slightly distracted. He had a few things to finish up before his shift ended, and he didn't have the patience for anyone who was just browsing. Keanu turned toward him, his calm demeanor barely changing. "I was just looking at this one," he said, pointing to the bike. "Can you tell me more about it?" The employee nodded, glancing at the bike with the same bored expression he had given every other customer that day. "Sure, it's one of our newer models. It's got a great engine, smooth handling, and it's perfect for anyone who likes a bit of power on the road. It's definitely not for beginners, though." Keanu nodded, his interest piqued. He had been riding for years and could appreciate the finer details of a bike. He asked a few more questions, but as he did, the employee's tone began to shift. The man seemed increasingly irritated, as though Keanu's calm and patient nature was annoying him. It was hard to say why. Maybe it was because Keanu wasn't showing the excitement that usually came with a potential sale. Maybe it was because Keanu wasn't the type of customer the employee expected, someone who would show up, ask the right questions, and then leave without buying anything. "Anything else?" the employee asked, his voice now a little sharper. He was ready to move on to another customer, someone who would be easier to deal with. Keanu, however, was undeterred. He continued asking about the features of the bike, his questions thoughtful and precise. The employee, now visibly frustrated, let out a small sigh. "Look, if you're just browsing, maybe it's better you look around elsewhere," he said, crossing his arms. "We've got a lot of people who are actually interested in buying something today." Keanu's face remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "I'm interested," he said, trying to clarify. "I just want to know more about it first." The employee, not willing to listen any further, shook his head. "I'm telling you, if you're just wasting time, there's no point in continuing this conversation. We're here to help serious buyers, not tire kickers." His tone was dismissive now, the frustration clear. Keanu stood still for a moment, trying to process the sudden change in the interaction. He had come to the dealership with genuine interest, and yet here he was being brushed aside. But rather than getting upset, he simply decided to leave. He didn't feel the need to argue, and he wasn't the type to raise a scene. With a slight nod, he turned toward the door. As Keanu walked away, the employee watched him go. His mind wasn't on the man who had just left, but on the other customers he still needed to attend to. He had no idea who the person was that he had just brushed off. No idea that he had just disrespected one of the most famous actors in Hollywood. He had no reason to think much of it. Keanu was just another guy in a jacket, after all. But little did he know this was the moment that would turn into something much bigger. The kind of moment that would make him realize just how wrong he had been. After Keanu left the dealership, the employee didn't give the situation much thought. He returned to what he was doing, assisting the other customers and preparing the paperwork for those who were ready to make a purchase. He was used to dealing with all kinds of people, from first-time buyers to seasoned riders, and to him it was just another day. However, within minutes, a quiet buzz began to stir in the dealership. A few of the customers who had been lingering around the showroom started whispering among themselves. One of them, an older man who had been admiring the same bike Keanu had been looking at, spoke up. "Did you see that?" he asked. "I think that was Keanu Reeves." The employee blinked and looked up. He hadn't thought much of the man who had walked out, but now that the name was mentioned, a strange realization hit him. He tried to push it away. After all, he was just doing his job. Why would someone like Keanu Reeves, an actor so famous it seemed like everyone knew his face, come into his dealership for something as simple as buying a motorcycle? It didn't make sense, but the whispers didn't stop. In fact, they grew louder, until the manager of the dealership walked over, sensing something was off. He'd overheard the name Keanu Reeves and knew exactly what that meant. "Hey, what's going on here?" the manager asked, looking from the employee to the customers. Nothing," the employee said, feeling uneasy. "I think there was a misunderstanding with one of the customers. He left without buying anything." The manager raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "What customer?" The employee suddenly felt the weight of his mistake. His face turned pale. He knew exactly who the customer had been now. It was Keanu Reeves, the very man who had starred in some of the most iconic films of the past few decades. He felt his stomach drop as he realized just how badly he had handled the situation. The manager seemed to sense that something was off, and without wasting another second, he turned to leave the showroom, heading straight for the parking lot. The employee, now filled with a sinking sense of guilt, followed behind, wondering what exactly he had done. By the time they reached the door, Keanu was already gone. The manager scanned the parking lot, but the motorcycle enthusiast who had walked in just moments ago was nowhere to be seen. It was too late to apologize, too late to make things right. The employee's mistake hung heavily in the air. Back inside, the atmosphere had shifted. The dealer's staff, who had been busy with customers just moments ago, were now whispering among themselves. Some of the customers, too, seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. "Do you think he'll come back?" one asked, her voice filled with curiosity. "I don't know," the manager replied, his voice tight. "But if he does, we'd better be ready to make it right. You don't treat someone like that, especially not someone like him." Meanwhile, Keanu had already left the dealership, his motorcycle parked a few blocks away. He had no intention of returning, at least not yet. He wasn't angry, nor was he frustrated. He had simply been met with a situation that didn't make sense to him. The way the employee had treated him, dismissive, rude, and quick to judge, was not the kind of interaction he was used to. He had come to the dealership with genuine interest, looking to learn more about a bike that had caught his eye. Instead, he'd been made to feel like he wasn't welcome, as if his presence was somehow a nuisance. That bothered him, but he wasn't one to hold grudges. Keanu had always been the kind of person who let things slide, preferring to keep a low profile and avoid confrontation. But this situation was different. As he sat in his car, the thought lingered in his mind. Should he just let it go, or should he do something about it? He wasn't the type to seek revenge or try to make a spectacle out of something small, but something told him that he needed to address this. Not for himself, but for the people who came to the dealership after him, people who might face the same kind of treatment. Keanu wasn't about to let that happen. After a few moments of reflection, he decided to return. He wasn't going to make a scene. That wasn't his style, but he knew he had to go back and clear the air, if only for the sake of the other customers who might be treated the same way. Keanu drove back to the dealership. He didn't rush, and he didn't feel the need to prepare a speech. He just wanted to make sure that the situation was understood, that it wasn't about him being a celebrity, but about the way people should treat one another no matter who they were. When he arrived, the dealership was quieter than before. The manager and the staff were gathered at the back of the store, speaking in hushed tones. The employee who had been so rude to Keanu earlier was standing by himself near the front desk, his face flushed with embarrassment. It was clear that everyone in the store knew what had happened. Keanu walked in without fanfare. He wasn't here to make a dramatic entrance. He was just another person stepping through the door, hoping to resolve something that had been left unsettled. The employees froze when they saw him, and for a brief moment the entire room was silent. The manager quickly approached, a nervous smile on his face. "Mr. Reeves, Keanu raised a hand, interrupting him. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said, his voice calm and even. "I just wanted to clear the air." The employee who had treated Keanu so poorly earlier stood there, shifting from foot to foot, his eyes on the floor. He felt deeply ashamed. Keanu turned to him, his expression softening. "Hey," he said, his tone not harsh but firm. "I get that things can get busy, but you don't need to treat people like that. Not me, not anyone. It's about respect." The employee nodded quickly, his face a mixture of guilt and regret. "I'm really sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know who you were, and I just assumed you weren't serious." Keanu smiled slightly. "I get it. But you never know who's walking through that door. So just remember to be kind. It goes a long way." The manager, standing nearby, gave a small nod of approval. "You're absolutely right," he said. "I apologize for the way things were handled. We'll make sure something like this doesn't happen again." Keanu, still calm and collected, nodded in return. "No harm done," he said. "I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm not here to make anyone uncomfortable." He didn't need to say much more. The situation had been diffused and the lesson had been learned. Keanu didn't expect an apology or special treatment. All he wanted was for people to treat each other with respect. And he hoped that this small interaction would serve as a reminder to everyone in the dealership. Keanu turned to leave, but not before glancing at the bike he had been eyeing earlier. "I'll take it," he said casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I'll be back to pick it up tomorrow." And with that, Keanu Reeves walked out of the dealership, leaving behind an impact that would be remembered long after he was gone. The next day, as Keanu was driving to the dealership to pick up the motorcycle, he had a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't one of anger or frustration, but more a sense of curiosity. The events from the day before had stayed with him. They lingered in his mind, not because of how he had been treated, but because of how people responded to him once they realized who he was. There was always this odd mixture of surprise, confusion, and admiration, even from the simplest encounters. But this time it was different. This time the whole situation had become a lesson for everyone involved. As he pulled up to the dealership, Keanu could see the staff milling about outside. The air felt thick with a kind of tension. There was no denying that the atmosphere had changed. The usual hustle and bustle had been replaced by something quieter, more subdued. It was like the employees were all waiting for something to happen. Keanu parked his car and stepped out, taking a slow, deliberate breath before walking toward the door. He wasn't here to make a scene or cause any trouble. He had made up his mind to simply pick up the bike and be on his way. But deep down, he knew that this wasn't just about the motorcycle anymore. It was about making sure that the right message had been delivered, not just for himself, but for everyone else who walked into the dealership, regardless of who they were. When he stepped through the door, the atmosphere immediately shifted. The air seemed to freeze for a split second as the employees turned to look at him. It wasn't the same casual glance as before. This time there was a mixture of guilt and recognition in their eyes. They knew exactly who he was now, and they knew exactly why he had come back. The manager was the first to approach, his posture stiff but respectful. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice sincere, "thank you for coming back. We really appreciate it, and we want to make sure everything is perfect for you today." Keanu smiled, giving a slight nod. "No need to thank me. I just came to get the bike I was looking at yesterday." The manager gestured to the bike, which was now parked in the showroom, polished and gleaming. It looked even better than it had the day before. "It's all ready for you," he said. "And once again, I just want to apologize for what happened yesterday." That wasn't the kind of experience we want to offer anyone who walks through our doors. Keanu's eyes softened and he nodded again. It's all right. People make mistakes. What's important is that we learn from them. The manager's face brightened at Keanu's calm response. We definitely learned from this one. We've already had a conversation with the staff and I promise we'll do better in the future. Keanu's gaze lingered on the bike for a moment. It's a beautiful machine, he said quietly. I'm looking forward to taking it out for a ride. The employee who had been so rude to Keanu the day before stepped forward slowly, his expression apologetic. Mr. Reeves, I want to say I'm really sorry for how I treated you. I had no idea who you were, and I just assumed you weren't serious about buying. I've been thinking about it all night and I feel terrible about it. I was out of line. Keanu turned to him, his face softening with understanding. It's okay. It happens. But it's important to remember that everyone deserves respect no matter who they are. The employee nodded quickly, his face reddening. I know, and I'm really sorry. I promise I'll never make that mistake again. Keanu gave him a small smile and then turned back to the bike. He could tell that the employee was genuinely remorseful, and that was enough for him. No harm had been done, and now it seemed that everyone had learned a valuable lesson. As Keanu prepared to pay for the bike, the mood in the dealership shifted again. The employees who had once been caught in a whirlwind of confusion and tension now seemed more at ease. They had seen Keanu's kindness and patience, and they had realized that there was no need to treat anyone like a nuisance, no matter how they looked or who they were. This wasn't just a lesson for the employee who had mistreated Keanu, but for the entire staff. The manager, still standing nearby, gave Keanu a warm smile. I just want to say again how much we appreciate you coming back today. It really means a lot to us. Keanu gave a nod of acknowledgement. I appreciate you all taking the time to learn from this. That's what matters. With the transaction complete, Keanu grabbed his helmet and took a few steps back, ready to leave. He paused for a moment, looking around the dealership one last time. It wasn't a grand gesture or a show of superiority that he was after. He just wanted to make sure that this was a turning point, not just for him, but for everyone who would come through the door in the future. If his small act of patience and understanding could help change the way people treated each other, then it would have all been worth it. Before he left, the employee who had been so rude to him earlier came up one more time. Mr. Reeves, he said, his voice full of sincerity. I just wanted to thank you again. You really showed me what it means to be kind, even when you've been wronged. I won't forget it. Keanu looked at him, his expression soft and genuine. We all have moments where we mess up, he said. It's how we respond that counts. The employee nodded and Keanu smiled before walking out of the dealership, feeling lighter than when he had first entered. He didn't expect any grand praise or recognition. He didn't need anyone to make a big deal out of it. What mattered to him was that he had done the right thing, even when it would have been easier to ignore the situation and walk away. As Keanu rode off on his new motorcycle, the wind whipping past him and the open road stretching ahead, he couldn't help but think about the ripple effect of his actions. It wasn't just about one interaction. It was about how one person's decision to act with kindness and patience could affect so many others. People might forget what you say, but they would always remember how you made them feel. And for Keanu, that was the most important thing. He rode through the streets of Los Angeles, enjoying the feeling of the bike beneath him. It wasn't just the speed or the power of the machine that he loved, it was the freedom. The same freedom that had brought him to motorcycles in the first place. As he made his way through the city, he couldn't help but smile. Today had been a reminder that life, just like a motorcycle ride, was full of bumps, unexpected turns, and moments of clarity. But the most important part, it was always about the journey. A few weeks passed since the incident at the motorcycle dealership, and Keanu found himself back in his normal routine. He had returned to the quieter side of life, away from the spotlight, and had been enjoying his time on the new bike he had purchased. There was something calming about the hum of the engine, the open road, and the sense of freedom that riding brought him. The wind against his face, the sounds of the world rushing by, it all felt like an escape from the demands of life. However, life has a funny way of bringing things full circle, and soon enough Keanu found himself back at the dealership, though this time it wasn't for a bike. One afternoon, while out on a ride through the city, Keanu decided to stop by the dealership again. He wasn't sure why, but something inside him told him that it was time to return. Maybe it was the bike. Maybe it was the fact that he had left things on a good note. But still there was this lingering curiosity, this desire to check in and see how things were going. When he walked through the door, the atmosphere had changed even more. There was no tension in the air now. Instead, there was a kind of energy that buzzed in the showroom, a renewed sense of respect among the staff. The employee who had previously been rude to him was still working there, and this time there was no nervousness in his demeanor. He greeted Keanu with a smile that was genuine, one that reflected a change in the way he approached his job. "Mr. Reeves, welcome back," the employee said, his tone bright and friendly. Keanu smiled back, surprised by how different the interaction felt. "It's good to be back," he said simply. "How's everything going here?" The employee nodded enthusiastically. "Things are going great, actually. We've had a few more customers come in recently, and I can tell you that things are much smoother around here now. Everyone's more relaxed. It's been a big change." Keanu's eyes softened, and he gave a knowing nod. "I'm glad to hear that. You guys were always good at what you do, but it's the way you treat people that really makes a difference." The employee smiled, clearly appreciative of Keanu's words. "We learned that from you. We've all been talking about how you handled everything the other day. It really made a difference, not just for me, but for the whole team." Keanu was surprised to hear that. He hadn't thought that his actions would leave such an impression. To him, it was just a simple moment, nothing that required a big effort. But it was a reminder that even the smallest of gestures could have lasting effects on those around you. "Good to know," Keanu said, still smiling. "So, what's new around here? Anything I should check out?" The employee, eager to share, quickly led Keanu over to a new display at the back of the showroom. The new bikes on display were sleek and modern, the kind that would catch anyone's eye. As they walked through the showroom, the employee told Keanu about some of the changes they'd made. They'd rearranged the bikes to make the space feel more open, and they had even started offering motorcycle riding classes for beginners, something the dealership hadn't done before. "We wanted to create an experience, not just a place to buy bikes," the employee explained. "We've been trying to bring more people in and make sure they feel like part of a community. It's not just about selling a bike, it's about sharing the passion." Keanu nodded, impressed by the effort they had put into transforming the place. "Sounds like you've really put thought into it." "That's awesome." He walked around the showroom for a bit longer, taking in the changes and the new energy that had filled the space. It was clear that the staff had learned something from the experience that had happened with him. They had taken the lesson to heart, and it had translated into a better experience for everyone who walked through the door. It wasn't just about bikes, it was about creating a space where people felt welcomed, respected, and appreciated. As Keanu prepared to leave, the manager, who had been observing from a distance, approached him with a friendly smile. "I just wanted to personally thank you again," he said. "Not just for coming back that day, but for the positive impact you've had on us. You really helped us see things from a different perspective, and we're grateful for that." Keanu paused, looking at the manager. "I didn't do anything special. I just wanted to make sure things were handled the right way." The manager shook his head. "It's not just that. It's how you showed us the importance of respect and kindness. We've all been trying to improve, and it's thanks to you." Keanu smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction that went beyond simply buying a bike. "I'm glad to hear that. It's all about the little things, you know? People can forget a lot of things, but they won't forget how they were treated." After a few more words of gratitude, Keanu left the dealership again, but this time, there was no lingering sense of curiosity or unfinished business. He knew that everything was going to be okay here. He had played a small part in helping the staff learn a valuable lesson, and it had made a difference. And that, to him, was what mattered most. As Keanu rode away from the dealership, the open road stretching ahead of him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. He had done the right thing, and that was all that mattered. The small act of kindness, the reminder to treat others with respect, it had rippled out far beyond what he had ever imagined. But in the end, it wasn't just about making a difference in the dealership. It was about how every small action we take can have a ripple effect on the world around us. How the way we treat others, especially when no one's watching, can shape the way the world treats us in return. Keanu didn't need the recognition or the applause. He didn't need anyone to make a big deal out of it. He was content knowing that his actions, no matter how small, had made the world just a little bit better. And sometimes, that's all anyone can really ask for. As he continued riding, the familiar sense of freedom washed over him once again. The road ahead was clear, and for the first time in a long time, Keanu felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The days after Keanu's last visit to the motorcycle dealership felt like a natural continuation of his life, one where everything had found its balance again. The bike had become a regular part of his routine, the sound of its engine now a familiar companion to his thoughts. Riding had always been a way for Keanu to connect with the world in a more peaceful, introspective way. And now, it felt like the road had a new meaning for him, one that wasn't just about the ride, but about the lessons it brought. But while Keanu had found his own peace, the changes that had taken place at the dealership were still unfolding. There was a quiet, steady shift happening there, and it wasn't just about selling motorcycles. It was about something deeper, something more meaningful. It was about creating a space where people could truly connect, not just with the bikes they were buying, but with each other. The staff had embraced the lesson Keanu had unknowingly taught them. The simple act of showing respect, of recognizing each person for who they were, had become the foundation of everything they did. The dealership was now a place where customers weren't just there to make a purchase. They were there to be seen, to be listened to, and to be valued. And that made all the difference. One afternoon, as Keanu was passing through the area on another ride, he decided to stop by the dealership once again. He wasn't expecting anything special, but something about it called to him. He wanted to see how things were going, to check in and make sure that the positive changes were sticking. It wasn't about him being a celebrity or needing recognition. It was simply about wanting to see the impact of the small, quiet act of kindness he had set in motion. When he walked in, the first thing that struck him was the atmosphere. It was different from the last time he had been here, not in a dramatic way, but in a more subtle, comforting sense. The place felt alive in a way that hadn't been there before. The staff were chatting with customers, not in a rushed, transactional way, but with a genuine interest in their needs and stories. There was a warmth in the air, an openness that Keanu hadn't noticed before. The employee who had treated him coldly that day was still there, but now he greeted Keanu with a natural smile. There was no awkwardness or shame in his expression. In fact, he looked proud of the progress the dealership had made. "Mr. Reeves, it's good to see you again," the employee said, his voice filled with a sense of comfort and confidence. Keanu returned the smile. "It's good to be back. I wanted to see how things were going around here." The employee led him through the showroom, telling him about the continued improvements. They had added more customer-focused services, like personalized bike fitting and a social space for riders to meet and talk about their experiences. But more importantly, they had created a community atmosphere, one that made people feel like they were part of something bigger than just a purchase. "We've really been focusing on building relationships," the employee explained. "We want people to feel like they belong here, not just as customers, but as part of the family." Keanu nodded, impressed by the change. It was clear that the dealership was no longer just a place to buy motorcycles. It had become a space for connection, a place where people could bond over a shared love for bikes and find support from others who understood their passion. The manager walked over, joining them as they continued to talk. "It's been amazing to see how things have changed. We've seen a huge shift in how people engage with us. It's not just about the sale anymore, it's about the experience." Keanu smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. "I'm glad to hear that. You guys are doing something really special here." The manager nodded. "We've learned a lot from you. It's not just about what we sell. It's about how we make people feel. That's the real value." Keanu paused, letting the words sink in. "Exactly. People remember how you make them feel. That's what lasts." As they continued talking, more customers came in, and Keanu could see the difference in the way the staff interacted with them. It wasn't just about the bikes. It was about the person standing in front of them, their stories, their needs, their dreams. The staff were genuinely interested, asking questions, listening carefully, and offering advice not just to make a sale, but to help the customers find the bike that was right for them. Keanu's presence seemed to have sparked a shift, but it wasn't about him. It was about the culture that had developed as a result of the lessons learned. And now that shift had become permanent. The staff were no longer just employees. They were people who cared about the work they did and the customers they served. After a while, Keanu decided it was time to leave. He had checked in on everything he wanted to, and there was nothing more to say. But before he left, the manager pulled him aside for a quick conversation. "I just wanted to thank you again," the manager said, his voice sincere. "You came in here that day not expecting anything, and you changed the way we think about our work. It wasn't just the bike. It was the way you showed us what it means to truly connect with people." Keanu smiled, his eyes softening. "I didn't do anything. You guys did all the work. It's about taking the time to treat people right." The manager shook his head. "You made us realize that. You helped us see that the little things really do matter, and that's something we'll carry with us from now on." Keanu nodded, feeling a sense of quiet fulfillment. He hadn't set out to change anything. He hadn't been looking for anything in return. But in the end, his simple decision to treat the employees with respect, to come back and address the situation with kindness, had helped create a lasting transformation. As Keanu walked out of the dealership, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city. He mounted his bike, the familiar hum of the engine welcoming him back. He wasn't in a hurry. There was no rush to get anywhere. He just wanted to ride, to feel the wind in his hair, to lose himself in the movement of the road. As he rode through the streets, Keanu felt a sense of peace wash over him. Life wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was about the small acts of kindness, the quiet decisions to treat others with respect and dignity. It was about the way we made people feel, and how those feelings could ripple out into the world, creating change in ways we might never see. Keanu had learned that lesson long ago, but the events at the dealership had reminded him of its importance, and as he rode through the city he couldn't help but smile. The road was long, but it felt like it was taking him exactly where he needed to be. He didn't need anyone to recognize him. He didn't need applause or recognition. He just needed to know that he had done the right thing, that he had made a small difference in the lives of others. And that was enough.